I think we all can agree at least that the world is not really a dangerous place right now. I think everyone understands the uh, the critical nature of where we are as a species because of the machinations of a few. We live in a world that is literally controlled by oligarchs, in a world where I would say 5% of the world's people are less, way less, control all the resources, and for good reasons. We've seen media houses become that used to be people depended upon for their information are now part of huge conglomerates, huge corporations. Um, you know, you look at Amazon, for example. We now get our news from the Washington Post, which is owned by Amazon. Um, we see the Hellersons have purchased a whole bunch of entertainment and news entities. So now, not only do they control the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the car we drive, they control what we hear and how we hear it. And so, with all the turmoil now and the upheaval on our planet, I just thought it'd be interesting to do a series, not a very expansive series, but a series through research to help us better understand what this is all about and where this is coming from. Now, please excuse me, this is quite a bit. I can't retain it all. So I'm going to have to be reading for you uh, what I prepared. So forgive me if I read, because, like I said, this is not something I'm going to be able to narrate in this monologue. Okay? So before 1492, the world was not divided along the lines we recognize today. It did not exist that way. Across the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Europe existed thousands of societies, each with their own systems of government, trade, spirituality, science, and land stewardships. Power existed, conflict existed, but global domination as a single coordinated system did not exist. It did not. Um, that changed with Europe's expansion beyond its borders. This is not a story of individual explorer alone. It is a story of a system, one that would reshape our planet. By the late 1400s, Western Europe was not the most powerful region on Earth, contrary to what you may have heard or what you may have been led to believe. It was not. It Europe was not the spreader or the proliferator of, you know, they like to talk about how they spread. Europeans and Americans like to talk about how they're the ones who were able to spread civilization. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. So we need to start understanding where all of this is coming from. And I think it will help us better to see where we're going as a people, particularly people of color. Because if you continue to suck up the lie that we as people of color were savages and we didn't know anything, we didn't have any history, then we'll continue to accept second class citizenship, if you will. Europe was immersed in feudalism and religious wars. It faced economic pressures, limited resources, and had intense competition between monarchies. With Europe, what Europe did possess rather, was a growing maritime technology and a belief that fused Christian supremacy, racial hierarchy, and economic extraction. That's what they possessed. These ideas would travel with them as they decided to step outside their shores, Europeans. The American conquest began in 1942 with when Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean. What followed was not discovery, it was invasion. Within decades, indigenous populations were subject to forced labor systems. Like the Ecomenda, land was seized and reorganized for European ownership. Indigenous religions, languages, and governance were violently suppressed. Diseases such as smallpox, previously unknown in the Americas, devastated the population. Some religions lost up to 90% of their indigenous population, some regions rather, lost up to 90% of their population in the Americas. This collapse was not accidental, it was exploited. Land without people became land for extraction. Gold, silver, sugar, and later cotton, feeding European wealth and power. The birth of racial hierarchy was designed to justify this violence. Europeans developed new frameworks. Before this era, identity was often based on religion, language, or nation. Now race became a tool. Indigenous people were labeled savages. Africans were labeled property. Europeans labeled themselves, you ready for it? Civilized and chosen. These classifications were not natural truths. In fact, they were not truths at all. They were political inventions designed to normalize what they were doing, dominating the people they came and saw on the land. This was the beginning of white supremacy as a global ideology, not just a belief, but a system embedded in law, economy, and culture. Section, Africa and the expansion of exploitation became a thing. European contact with Africa existed long before the transatlantic slave trade, often through trade and diplomacy. They didn't come with guns a-blazing as far as Africa is concerned. But by the 16th century, demand for labor in the Americas exploded. Of course, because the Native Americans were not up to the task. They were not used to hard labor. They hunted, they fished, that's how they lived. European powers partnered with and later overpowered African intermediaries to fuel a system that forcibly removed over 12 million Africans from their homeland. I am the descendant of those who survived. This was not random violence. It was organized, it was financed, it was insured, legally protected. Entire African societies were destabilized. Economies were reoriented towards human extraction, and generations lost to forced displacement. Africa was not underdeveloped. It was systemically drained. What began in the Americas and Africa became a repeatable model. Arrival under the banner of trade or religion, claiming land through violence or treaties made under coercion, replacing indigenous systems with European law and ownership, extracting resources and labor for European benefit, enforcing control through race-based hierarchy. This pattern would later extend across Asia, the Pacific Islands, and beyond. The effects were not temporary. They were structural. Closing the spread of white domination was not inevitable. It was constructed step by step policy by policy, ship by ship, and its consequences did not end with colonization. They live on in borders drawn without consent, economic inequalities between nations, cultural erasure and displacement, ongoing struggles for land, sovereignty, and recognition. To understand the present, we must first tell the truth about the beginning. So before 1492, the world was not divided, as I said. But within a few centuries, much of that world would be violently reshaped. And please note, I said violently reshaped. It's not ancient history. Medieval European cities contrast with African kingdoms, American cities, Asian trade routes by the late 1400s. As I said, in the Americas, the Europeans were not powerful at all. They feuded amongst themselves, tribe against tribe. It was constant war. And for those of you who have seen Game of Thrones, I don't know if you have seen Game of Thrones. If you haven't seen it, I think you should watch it. Because I look at I decided to start watching that series long after it became reality. And when I started, I was hooked. I couldn't stop watching it. I binge watched it. Not because I'm this person who would like to just absorb the carnage and all of that, or I even spend much time watching movies or that sort of thing. But I watched it because what I was seeing in Game of Thrones was literally those people telling on themselves how they lived. And I said to my wife, this is the truth coming out. This is how they lived. But I digress. You know, in the Americas, civilizations like the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Inca built cities. They built road systems and complex governments. In Asia, China and the Islamic world led global trade, science, and innovation. Europe, however, faced limited resources, political instability, and fierce competition between monarchies, as I said earlier. So the bottom line is that Europe was catching up. They weren't leading. Europe was not leading. So this idea that you now hear proliferated about how they are the creator of all things, excuse me. No, they are the last to have come into civilization. The technologies they're using today, they were derived from Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And one of the things that they did was to use Christianity as a moral shield to take what they wanted. And in the Middle East, you hear religion being used in Palestine, much the same way Christianity is used here in the Western world as justification for them to take what they want. This didn't stop in 1492. It's still here today. Wealth and land were framed as divine entitlement. And I think most of you who follow my channel would have heard me talk about this sense of entitlement. And it is shrouded in the pretext that God ordained it. God ordained it for them. That they have a right to whatever they take. They have a right to whomever they decide to, whose lives they decide to take. It's all because it's justified, because they're chosen and they're superior to everybody else. And they, as a consequence, have a right to do what they do. Exploration became a tool for economic survival and religious domination. This mindset would soon collide with entire continents. So when Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, what followed was not discovery, as I said, it was an invasion. Indigenous peoples were forced into labor systems. Land were seized, renamed, and claimed for European crowns. Languages were changed and leadership structures were suppressed or destroyed. Totally. They brought diseases like smallpox, measles, influenza, and the problem was that the indigenous communities had no immunity to those diseases. And within a century, some regions lost up to 90% of their population. This exploitation, it was tragic and it was planned. And so they created this racial hierarchy before this era. Identity was based on culture, language, or religion. And as I said, race became a political weapon. Now, the spread of white domination, it was not inevitable. It was constructed policy by policy, as I said. And now we are where we are because literally all of the indigenous people across the globe, whether it be in Asia, Africa, or the Americas, were bowed to the system that exists today. A system created, built methodically on the premise of white supremacy, and that Europeans and their descendants, wherever they were supplanted or, wherever they were transplanted themselves, now own the entire world. I'm not going to go too far in this opening series, but I wanted to explain in the briefest and probably most understandable way just how we got to where we are today, where we see might makes right and powerful nations now deciding they can literally take what they want when they want it. Guys, if you like this series, if you like this channel, please give us a thumbs up. I'm sorry. Subscribe to the channel, please. And please, the algorithms depend on your interaction. Leave us a comment. Tell us how you feel about what this series. It's a big, like I said, this is a start on this particular subject. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a like. Whatever. We appreciate it. The algorithms depend on it. It helps us to continue to talk to you this way. This has been the deep dive. Thank you very much.